Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Psychology and Spirituality, a Bridge to a Better Life discussion. I'm your host, Marcia Trajano, but with me is my dear friend. I can call you dear friend, right, Anne?
Of
Anne
course.
Sinclair. And she's coming to us from the UK, and I am coming to you from the US. But this is the first time you're watching this podcast program. Please note it is a weekly talk, psychology and spirituality, based on the works by Joanna de Angelis. And we're here to offer all of us a safe space to confront, to compare, maybe correlate, but mostly expand our concepts, our spiritual ideology and concepts into a psychological lens, and so be able to bring insights, even actionable tips, perhaps advice to help you and I lead a better life. Today, we're going to talk about guilt. Oh, this is so hard, right? But as we know, we are here and we call it our evolving nature, our evolving journey, right? As spirits, as immortal spirits. And this journey calls us to a process of self evaluation, a process of introspection. But as we do that, we start to uncover things, and we may lead sometimes to that feeling of something is not quite right that we may call our personal guilt. And for us today, I just wanted to know how can we ensure this journey, this evolutionary journey of our spirit toward a psychological as well as spiritual maturity should be one that focuses on our individuation, but an individuation that is without guilt. Can we even aspire to that? I don't know. We're going to know in a few minutes. But before we start our conversation, Anne, I'd like to recognize the organizations that are sponsoring the program. I would like to thank TV Mansão do Caminho, the United States Spiritist Federation, the International Spiritist Council, and AMI Brazil. If you have not done so, please hit subscribe. And if you'd like to check out other information, other channels, etc., you can do so by just checking www.spiritist.us. If you have any questions, critique, feedback, good or bad, or even ugly, right? Write to us in the chat window. And if we don't have time today, we'll certainly address them in the future. But as I said, this is just not easy. It's not easy for me. I have to be very frank with you. But let's start perhaps bringing a dictionary definition, Merriam-Webster, for example, of what guilt is. And I can tell you that in a dictionary definition, we find that we may address guilt as the fact of committing a breach of something, right? So it implies violating a law in existence. And from that perspective, if you go to the jury of man, right, the justice system, it will involve or not. But if you are deemed guilty, it involves some sort of penalty for you to address that guilty sentence. The second definition, it's all about the notion that you have committed a mistake, an error, an offense, but you've done that consciously. So it's very interesting. And when we think about it, the third definition is that it's a feeling. Now we're getting really blurry here. A feeling of deserving blame for imaginary offenses or for a sense of inadequacy. So that third definition, we start to talk about the realm that we're here to talk about, right? Which is the psychology as well as the notion of spirituality. How do we discuss guilt from this notion of I don't feel adequate, or I feel that I made a mistake and I'm feeling guilty? So we can say that, and I say this because it's really important to say out loud, right? But when we say that guilt, the healthy guilt, can function as a barometer, right? So it's there testing and defining and measuring our inner truth. The sense of this healthy guilt puts in motion when we do something that it can be even that it was defined, right? A sense of inadequacy, and we can say sense of inadequacy because I was supposed to be here and I'm still here, so I'm not putting all my effort to grow, to overcome challenges in life, right? But it's really something that we've done, the self deception that we feel. And it is all about the violation of our own values, our own standards. And those standards can be moral, ethical, whatever. And from that perspective, as I said before, this is considered healthy guilt because it can help us go back to the straight line, if you will. But I want to ask you, as we start talking about guilt, Anne, can we maybe talk a little bit about the different types of guilt that you know of, that you read about?
Hi, Marcia. Hi, everybody who's listening in. Thank you so much for having me on the chat today. Yeah, guilt is a really interesting topic. I just want to also frame it that, we talk about these big, how can I say, names like
Mhm,
guilt and others and so on. And we're looking at them now, trying to find the way forward through psychology and
mhm,
spirituality. While in the past, they might have been treated in a different way. They might not even have had the same level of names and things like that. So we have this possibility now as evolving spirits to slowly get to know ourselves, which is what the sages of antiquity had already said, that the pathway forwards is through self-knowledge. And self-knowledge requires us understanding what are we feeling. I
mhm.
mean, even like children in the past, we had no proper names for feelings and things, like
Yeah.
nowadays you start focusing a little bit more, even there are movies out and things. So when we think about self-knowledge, then what are we feeling? Feelings of guilt are very, very present in a lot of lives, mine
Mhm,
included.
mm,
And guilt can be like you just were saying, you can have like that guilty feeling which is telling you to do that wasn't a good way, and brings you back to where you ought to be going, suggests that you can need to go and balance the broken energy with wherever or whatever happened, and that is like a way of bringing you there. But there is like those deep levels of guilt. And if you read like what Joanna de Angelis, the spirit who brings us information of psychology to help us understand ourselves, she suggests that there are like particularly two sources that we could think about. Just
mhm,
and one is when we have the guilt from the past, from our past lives, from our past experiences, and let's say we committed a crime of some sort, we were not found out, nobody knew, we died with it, we took with it, but that inner compass, our conscious, it knows that we've done it. So we have this sense inside us, although we might not remember what the event is, and we have this shadow over us in that particular kind of topic, because whatever we do, and that you see it a lot in the media, people saying, oh, they got off scot-free,
yeah.
they,
Hoo-hoo, they did it,
justice,
right?
yeah, justice was not served, they got off, blah blah. And as I have no problem saying no problem, because the justice of the universe balances everything always. It's just a matter of
Absolutely.
time. And
Hmm.
also it's, you carry it with you, and everything needs to be readdressed, but not thinking about it in a bad punitive way, but thinking in a constructive and evolutionary way, perhaps. So sometimes it will come to you in an opportunity for you to awaken and think about that subject, and deal with it. But quite often these things from the past lives, we are not aware of them,
Hmm.
but it just seems like areas of our life where we just naturally always feel guilty about things. But also, guilty feelings can come a lot from the way we were brought up, from the education that we got in our early childhood. We know that the
Hmm.
first 5 years of childhood
Yes.
determine the formation of our personality for this incarnation, for this life. So, whatever our caregivers, who are the parents or teachers or clergy or nannies, or whoever is looking after us, with no blame towards them, because people just do what they know how to do. But the way that we might have been brought up might have been in manipulating us,
Yeah.
uh, making us feel guilty if we don't do as they say.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think just to make sure that I got it. So there is that the deep unconscious, right? Those things that are buried, and they're buried because they come from a different life. We don't bring, most of us at least, don't bring that memory of that. But the triggers to understanding that guilt are usually our reaction to those pain points that we carry. So I love when you said, we got out scot-free. Did we? No, we didn't, right? But then at some point, our um, awareness, or really focus on how do I feel when this happens, is really helping us under become aware of what's going on. And the second is that education. I wanted to bring something that you were talking here, and I thought about it, which is just that guilt that we are aware we made a mistake, right? We It's not buried, and it's not from our parents or caretakers, caregivers, etc. But it is, I made a mistake. It is an error or failure, etc. And the thing that came to my mind, and I wanted to share, it's a personal experience, and but it was several years ago when I went to Johannesburg in South Africa. And last day, we didn't have anything else. I went for work, and then there was some time for vacation, and we went to the, I believe it's called the Apartheid Museum, and it's enormous. But we're just going through, and it was the, I would say, the most impactful experience I've had in my life from a museum perspective. They really made you aware. At the entrance, you're randomly given a card. I don't know if you've been there, Anne, but
Yeah,
you're randomly given a card that if you're white or colored, you go to different entrances of the museum. So my husband was got the white card. I didn't. So he went through this beautiful entrance, and I went into a gate that felt like I was an animal. So just there, it starts to sensorial sense there's something wrong. But anyways, back several hours of reading, and really getting to that intellectually. At the very end, there were the film, the movies made as a result of Nelson Mandela becoming the president and stating the forgiveness. I don't know if you know about it, but the offender and the offended had to come face to face,
yeah,
and it was a choice. It was a choice, right? But come face to face and ask for forgiveness. And you go footage after footage after footage, and that got into such an emotional response for me, because no matter who you are, everybody cried. and it was very authentic tears of, I am repenting from guilt of a conscious offense. And you said it well. Sometimes it was culturally ingrained in the mind of that person to treat the other as less than. We don't know, right? Or somebody defending and killing somebody else, whatever it is, but it was very deep seated. So, guilt, forgiveness are like two sides of the same coin, right?
100%.
Yeah,
I think that is actually one of the key points around guilt is forgiveness.
yeah,
And it's interesting because it's forgiveness for self
yes,
and asking forgiveness of others
yes,
and trying to do reparations in
yeah,
whichever way is
yeah,
possible. And it's I find it really interesting because when you think about, like, say, Jesus taught us, he said,
hmm,
"Oh, you must forgive, 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 forgive 70 times 77."
yeah,
When you think about it, just like, "Oh, you must do this because if
yes,
not, what? If not, you go to hell,"
yeah,
or something like that. So
yes,
you must do this because I am telling you, because the bosses are telling us that
yeah,
this is what Jesus has taught us. It makes it really difficult, like, at least for a spirit like myself.
yeah,
But if when I start to understand the function of forgiveness in terms of recognizing the error, and looking at it, taking responsibility for it,
yes,
and trying to think what adjustments need I do not to repeat the same mistake because I can see the consequences of this mistake.
yeah,
And then that forgiveness, instead of being an imposition out of nowhere, or somebody,
yeah,
yo, you must do this,
yeah,
is saying, no, this is the medicine that you need to get better,
to free
to heal
yourself.
yourself
Yeah,
and
yeah,
help heal others. It
yeah,
just completely transforms it for me.
yeah, absolutely. And I like what you said earlier on when you said in the past there were punitive forms of reparation, right? That today it's not so harsh because now we are discussing, even having words to talk about our feelings of inadequacy or self-deception, etc. That perhaps even 100 years ago were our ancestors are not talking or accessing that before perhaps with the birth of psychology. But I think it's very important for us to understand that um, the healing power of re- repentance or remorse, right? And I see it like a little bit of a a flow chart, right? You make a mistake, and then that leads to perhaps to remorse. If you don't do anything about that remorse, that awareness that you've done something wrong, right? And as you said, Anne, if it's something that you really don't know, you, as that inner you, that immortal you, will know, right? So it doesn't matter. But the awareness of the issue, the failure, the hurt that you caused, whatever, then there's a question of, do we want to ask for forgiveness or forgive the other, which is number one? But then, what are you doing to address, to repair? You use the word reparation, which is a very good word. What do we need to do to repair the damage and or hurt that you caused? And this is really important because we're talking about emotions and feelings here as well. So let's talk about maybe that the sense of inadequacy that our parents, willingly or not, cause, and with that they do that. So let me think about a little bit, right? Because if we think about Anne, um, that guilt internalized from childhood manipulation, or they many people call it adaptive guilt, is really all about the guilt that you have for having learned and internalized what our parents, and I'm saying our, right? Because it's all of us, or our caregivers gave to us, and we have internalized, and this is gets really hairy, right? It gets really complicated because it is the guilt, the manipulation, right? The different levels of the manipulation, and then the internalization of those quote unquote rules to be able to meet my parents' needs. But then the guilt that I come and I have guilt to myself because I'm really not being authentic and truthful to myself. But then there's the guilt that comes from from violating perhaps the imposed manipulation, and it gets so hairy. So let's talk about it. What are maybe, what can we talk, and maybe what some examples of that comes to your mind?
Yeah, I would like just like to say something
Mm-hmm.
is like, let's not go down the rabbit hole of blaming the
Thank
parents,
you.
the
Yeah.
elders, the whoever, because that's one of the things we take responsibility. Now we're watching this program, we're talking
Mhm.
here, we're all adults. We take
Yeah.
responsibility for our choices now. Everybody did the best they could do within what they had to give, within their
Yeah.
possibilities at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Now that we are left with the consequences, is what do
Mm-hmm.
we do with that? And rather
Mm-hmm.
than saying it's all their fault, they're saying, okay,
Mm-hmm.
now I have this in me. What am I going to do about it? And when you were talking, a typical guilt trip that happened to me and to many I know from my generation
Uh,
was when you go to eat your food,
there you go. I was thinking the same.
you don't feel so hungry. You have like half the amount that's been served to you. You don't want any more. But then those parents or caregivers say, no, you need to finish your plate. You need to clean your plate. You must eat everything, because this is what they'll say to back
Uh,
in my day. There are children starving in Africa. And I
yes.
would cry. I would be so sad that children are starving in Africa. But
Yes.
how, uh, as an adult, what is the connection between me overeating and becoming,
Yes.
uncomfortable or potentially obese into my
Yeah.
adult lifehood with children starving in Africa? So it's
Yeah.
that guilt trip to force me to do something that I was naturally not wanting to do. And I know loads of people, we all have this kind of thing. And we dare not respond saying, how is it that by me eating this, I can help the children in Africa? It makes no difference to them. This
Oh,
food is not there. This food is here in front of me. But of
especially
course,
because of the thinking of the child, right? Because sometimes we're talking about this when a child is 4, 5, 6 years
and
old. Yeah.
this is the really important part. Whatever you tell a child in those first 5 years, whatever you tell them, whatever you demonstrate to them, they take that as truth.
Yes.
They take that in and they form that within their inner psyche as this
Mm-hmm.
is how the world works and this is the
Mm-hmm.
truth.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then afterwards we need to remodel it. But
Yes.
that is your basic building block. They do not question things, children. They just accept it in early childhood. So sometimes if they have a reaction, I think it's all about us learning new ways of educating children. Doesn't mean that they should then have no boundaries and do whatever they want and run, it's not that. But it's finding different ways in which we can be more coherent, and that we exemplify what we want for them. I remember was working with a family, and the child was screaming, 2-year-old, 2.5-year-old. "Ah!" The mother was screaming louder, telling them to shut up. Ah, shut up, shut up, shut up. Stop that, stop that. And so I said to the mother, I said, what would you like your child to do? She said, I want them to calm down and to speak gently. I said, well, you need to demonstrate that to them, that is what you
Yes.
want. You
Yeah.
demonstrated that what you want is to shout, because that is what you are doing. She was
Yes.
not very happy. But
Yeah.
what I'm going to say is, it's not about the blame. It's to say, what do you want your child to do? How do you want to show them the way? And it's also like saying, like positive instruction.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of saying, don't run, In order to say don't run, you need to run and then imagine what it is not to run. That's not very helpful for a very young
Yeah.
child. You
Yeah.
say, walk slowly, hold mummy's hand,
Yeah.
walk together with us, let's walk safely. So you give it a clear instruction of what you want rather than the opposite, because it makes a mess in people's hands. The reason we say those things is because that we are just repeating how
Yes.
the examples of cultural ways of bringing up children from our generation.
Yes.
To break that mold is also, it's hard, because we need to see it first in order to then transform it.
Yeah.
So in terms of children and guilt tripping them to behave the way we want, that carries on into adult life as well, in
Yes.
relationships.
Yes.
If you love me, you'll do this. If you
Yes.
don't do this, it's because you don't love me. All this kind of manipulation. So where's that coming? That's coming from that child that learned that this is how the world functions.
There's other aspects, right? That you made me remember, that manipulative, but also aspects of my own. Let's say I'm an adult, I have a child, but for whatever reason, I'm no longer fulfilling my dreams of. I'm going to grab something really out there, right? I wanted to be an astronaut, and I can't because now I'm the mother, and so I push my child to have the attributes that perhaps I had or desires to become an astronaut to fulfill my initial desire. And that can create, and I say this because this is quite common to have um, pushing your own inadequacies or your own inability to fulfill your dreams into a child is also a form of manipulation, and the child may or may not accept that. So, for example, I may say that hypothetically, I I want to follow this career, and my parents are like, no, 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 don't do it. This is bad career. You're not going to do this. You're going to go there. And let's say I answer, but at some point I am so unhappy, right? That I move, maybe I'm in my 20s, early 20s, but I moved to my real career that I wanted. But the bond toward my feelings of guilt for transgressing that initial requirement from my parents may sit inside of me, and I'm not even aware that I have this pain point for not doing. So it creates some ugly aspect of that relationship of guilt, which is if you do, you're doomed. If you don't do, you're doomed as well, right? So maybe we can talk a little bit about it in that idea, right? What is the problem with manipulating our child through those types of guilt tripping or manipulation? I don't know if you have any thoughts about it, Anne.
Yeah, no, I think that, let's say, sometimes the people doing the manipulation, they might be doing it unconsciously,
Correct.
trying to
Hmm.
fulfill their own
Hmm.
voids.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think that one of the things that might be helpful for people is to think the child that's come to you as your daughter, as your son, is a brother or sister in spirit
that's
who's only
right.
being a child temporarily. And uh, as I was saying to like somebody the other day, had a baby, I said, you are the portal through which the soul is arriving. She said, oh, no, I don't like that. This is my baby.
I love it. But even in the language, right? As you said, changing from I am your mother into you're a vessel, a portal, and also removes the notion of ownership. No
Yeah,
one
exactly.
belongs to anyone else.
Exactly. And the job of the
Hmm.
parents is to support and guide that spirit at the
Hmm.
beginning of the incarnation while
Yeah.
the physical body is still growing and developing, and giving them
Yeah.
guidance and support for, in terms of the culture in which they're coming into, about the language, and
Hmm.
family relations, a city. Because if you are born into one culture in one life and to a different culture the next life,
Mhm.
you need
Yeah.
to learn all those codes of relationships
Yes.
and behavior of that culture, of that family, of that situation. And it's just knowing that, listen to the child and what they're saying. One of the things that I've seen quite a few times also is the child so much wants to be loved and approved
Yeah.
by the
Yeah.
parents that they end up not knowing even what they want. So you say, what
Correct.
would you like to do? Following your example of the career, what would you like to do when you grow up? What are your interests? Which is, where are your inner talents or your aspirations? And
Mhm.
they will look at the mom or look at the dad for guidance, because they are afraid of saying, I want to be a dancer, knowing
Yes.
that they aspire for them to be a lawyer.
Yes. Yes.
So they're looking, because their need for approval and love from those caregivers, which is essential for your survival. It is a big thing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It is
Yeah.
essential for your survival that you are accepted and looked after and nourished.
Mhm. Yeah.
Means that you block what you want, your individuality, who you are as a spirit coming in. You block it because your survival needs are stronger. And then it comes to a point that it's so blocked that you can't even remember, or you can't really sometimes access what
Yes.
it is. So you're always doing something that somebody else dreamed for you, and thinking, well, but what would you like to do? Says, I don't know.
And there's a self-sabotaging, right? That your true, authentic
Exactly.
self's desire and mission, etc. But also at some point, and I just let's put down our lifetime, right?
Mm.
Midlife crisis will occur, and we all go through it, but will be a very difficult one to overcome or to experience, because you're going to crash through all of this consciously or not. It all surfaces up. But I wanted to just to rephrase what we talked about, just to make sure that we are in sync here, and right. So we talked about childhood manipulation that is sometimes referenced or referred by as adaptive guilt, that guilt from those internalized childhood manipulation. And it's when it is exemplified is when parents mostly unconsciously will use their child, to which they are, what did you call it? The portal? The portal only, but the parent unconsciously use that child to manage their own unresolved issues, losses, or their own, perhaps there's a sense of rejection, right? And they have felt rejected. Now they transfer all the need to belong to the child, or even other very difficult feelings, perhaps. But because they're transferring their own sense of inadequacy, and this is what's hard to talk about it here, but they transfer and they hold unconsciously, they hold their child responsible for their well-being.
Hmm.
And when they do that, and they start those famous guilt tripping, right? And they use their own, right? Their own whatever pain points, suffering to use those emotional blackmail to their child. And the other side of it, because there's always two sides, is that the children, we somehow maybe we develop survival strategies. So those survival strategies is one way to accommodate, right, the parents' desires and needs, but also to avoid abandonment or emotional abandonment from that parent. And they start to understand that at some point there will be disloyal. I don't know if that's the best term, right? They
Mm.
will negate, they will deny the parents' needs for this or that. And in that, they'll also go through some guilt. So it is hard. There's also one of the things that I wanted us to bring here because it's quite common, which is, and I don't have time. I
Mm.
work. Let's pretend, right? I work. I decided to do a new degree in whatever, and I am a volunteer and I'm a friend. My life is full. So what do I do with my own sense of inadequacy as a parent to my children? What do I do? The number one thing that we do today is we give the child something.
Gift,
A
toys,
gift, a toy,
toys,
or
phones,
whatever.
iPads,
And,
computers.
and it's lovely that you parent me, or you, and I don't know how did you raise your children, but it's good to see parents giving that because it's out of love. But that giving out of love or not, but giving, it does not substitute for the time that child requires from you, parent. Right. So I think it's important for us to talk a little bit about it. Where is the fact that the giving things will not bypass the bond that is required from a parent to a child.
Yeah, and I think that one of the difficulties nowadays is
Hmm.
that society in general, since
Hmm.
let's say women were able to go out into the workforce and
Yes.
forge their careers before, in Western society, I'm talking about Western society like modern times, let's say,
Hmm.
women were the main caregivers at home. And then this transformed and women went out to work. But they carried on being the main caregivers at home as well, except they were doing two jobs instead of one now, suddenly. And the balance of that going forward is still not forged very well. And the task of educating and parenting your children, it is a big task,
Yes.
and it's not
Yes.
valued in our
Yeah.
society. It's not
Yes.
valued because you don't
Yeah.
get paid for it, because the value in our society, materialistic society, is how many dollars or pounds do you get for your
Hmm.
work.
Hmm.
Looking after children and bringing them up, you don't get paid at all. Actually, it costs you a lot. So
Yes.
it creates some level of confusion, and it
Yes.
becomes like it's not important,
Yeah.
that it just happens naturally. And it does happen naturally because, let's say, even in the animal kingdom, if you think, mother monkey and baby monkey, they somehow battle through, and it comes out. But in terms of human babies, we're coming with all this past with us, all this potential for growth and spiritual development, all this complex psychological makeup.
Yes.
And it is such an opportunity. That early childhood is such a golden opportunity to instill really good rules and
Yes.
behaviors for
Hmm.
life.
Yes.
And that then, you would have that structure. But it is true that sometimes parents both need to go to work because to pay the bills, and
Yeah.
they can't be at home. So the parents should not be guilt tripping themselves either,
Yeah.
because the child needs somebody to teach them that. And if it's not the mom or the dad, it can be the grandma, the auntie, or whoever's looking after them that fulfills that role of main caregiver. But it is we there is interesting here, like in social services, when you think about interventions by the government
Hmm.
social services because of children being neglected.
Yeah.
Some children are being neglected in poverty. They don't have enough food, they don't have enough stimulation, or they don't have a clean house to live in. But there is another part, which there have been many cases, and it's called neglect by the wealthy,
Oh,
in,
yeah.
in which exactly what you described,
Yeah.
that the
Yeah.
children come back from school to an empty house, perhaps to activities and things, but that mom, that dad, that presence of love there is not there.
The sense of belonging, right? And is not instilled, perhaps.
And it's just like it's that emptiness, that loneliness, and also that moral reference of,
Yes. Hmm.
how's this supposed to work when you
Yeah.
know, even like, referencing when you come back from school and, parents ask, well, how's it at school today, what did you learn? But it's inviting them to share what's happened,
Yeah.
so that also if things that happened were not, or were difficult, you might have an
Hmm.
opportunity to talk about it. How did that make you feel? So how did the
Correct.
teacher resolve that?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
are you satisfied with that? And just have those conversations. But I think a lot of us find those conversations difficult because we don't have a model that we've built up in our own childhood, perhaps.
Yeah, yeah, that's very, very true. But I appreciate it. I know this is your area of work, right? In England, and it's really it's good for us to remember that it is potentially an increasingly larger problem to have the neglect by the wealthy, where the one commodity they don't have is their time, right?
Yeah,
So
and you call it emotional neglect.
I see. I see. I
So it's
see.
not material neglect because they've got
Yeah.
everything material, but it's emotional neglect because they don't
Yeah.
have the love and nurturing.
Yeah.
And as children, we need that validation as
Yeah.
we're going along. Uh,
Yeah.
and I mean, we're talking about this, and I really want to put it out there, like, whoever's listening in, don't feel guilty. Don't want to get
It's
guilty from
contrary. It's contrary to what we want here because it's
exactly.
really let's talk about guilt so that you know that it's okay to feel that way, right? We all
Yeah,
somehow feel, but don't punish yourself. I think that's the what I would like to bring here is no matter what, there will be guilt, but there is a healthy component, which is almost like pain, right? And guilt is like pain, that it's not that you want to feel pain, but when you feel pain, it's telling something is wrong. So let's go ahead and look at the source of the pain to rid of it, to correct the wrong. Likewise, with pain, I think we should look at because it's all feeling based, it's hard because we don't speak feeling very well, do we? So, no
exactly.
matter what, we still are infants, if you will, in the vocabulary, in the language of honoring all there is, this emotional roller coaster that it's sometimes our feelings up and down, and we feel this and we feel that. But the more we address it, the more we look at ourselves, the more we start to be in tune to positive, negative, etc., etc. I wanted to say something, and because I think we're reaching the end of our time today. Um, when I think right when we talk about this healthy guilt as a barometer of our inner truth, right? When we say, I want to get rid of it, I want to get rid of this feeling of guilt. And we mentioned before, I just want to confirm here again with you that, especially if it's coming from, I don't know, something you've done from a past life, but also from that internalized childhood guilt. Let's look at it. The resolution for that inner conflict is to understand and to be reminded of what is it that I am or I want to be. It's really reaching to the authenticity of our desires, our goals, our objectives, and to be there by perhaps looking at how can I look for choices that are available to me, right, in a way that they will serve me with respect and psychological integrity. What are your thoughts on that, so that when we part, we have an idea of what is it that we can do? We talked about forgiveness, but we also need to talk about this inner voyage, and understand that those feelings are there for a reason, and that we need to look at them um, with love and kindness to ourselves.
Yeah, I was just going to start like exactly what you're saying. Self-love is
Hmm.
essential.
Yeah, yeah.
And by loving ourselves and accepting that, even say, okay, I'm not happy with the situation where I am.
Hmm.
Pardon me, I'm going to cough. And instead of just being playing out the role of the victim, or the power, feeling powerless, or sad, and just acknowledging, okay, this, I'm not happy with this, or this is not what I really want. I don't even know what I did want. But you slowly, by acknowledging it and opening space to allow those things that have been repressed into what we call the shadows. I always call the
Yes.
shadows is under the carpet. When the thing
Yes.
doesn't serve me at the moment, we put it under the carpet.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, so authenticity that we might have lost earlier on, it's under the carpet. It's there, but we need to like lift a little bit the edge of the carpet, and all
And
kinds of things might come running out.
exactly. Get a little bit dirty, right? It's gonna be all
So
sorts of dust in this, but it's okay.
but you need to feel brave, and you can feel brave when you feel strong in your own self-love, and saying that your self-love is within the love of the universe that sustains all life and everything. And that even if let's say you are afraid of getting things wrong, we will all always get things wrong. It's okay. It's part of how we learn and how we progress. The thing when we get the result that we don't want, and think it's like, oh, the wrong result, or I can't afford to get it wrong again, or something like that. Why not? We will get it wrong as many times as we need to, because each time that we get the result that's not what we wanted, or we learn something from that.
Yes.
And each
Yes.
bit of the learning is a piece of the puzzle that we go building of our own evolution. So instead of trying to be perfect and get everything right because of some expectation that's out somewhere in society that we have accepted for ourselves, that we are not allowed to get things wrong, and
Mhm.
that we're not allowed to fail, inverted commas.
Yeah.
So what is to get things wrong is thinking, so I did this and this was the result. Okay, so now I've learned that doing this is what you get. So if I
Yeah.
want something different, I need to do something different. It's the famous
Absolutely.
thing. You
Yeah.
can't get different results if you keep doing the same thing,
Yeah.
because it's just going to repeat again. And it's just having that courage, that moral courage to try something different. And even, if it's not what you wanted or what you expect, or it comes out different, that's okay. It's part of your learning. And say, oh, I'm already of a certain age, I shouldn't be making mistakes anymore, I should be perfect now, I guess. No, we're not perfect. We're all making mistakes all the way to the grave.
Yes. Yes.
And the thing of the mistakes is, or the experiments that we do, is just take the learning and say, okay, that's interesting. This is what I can take from this, and how do we build on top of it? And that self-forgiveness, forgiving others as well, and just taking back the power to ourselves, so we can change things. You're not going to change like dramatically everything from one day to the next, because it's a bit unstabilizing, but you go slowly changing things, and then everything, the balance goes changing, and new things come out. It's worthwhile uh,
Yes.
giving yourself the opportunity to live out all the experiences that this life is offering you, without feeling afraid of getting it wrong, of disappointing somebody, of perhaps repeating errors of the past. We are here, this is an experiment. Being on earth is an experiment. We're experimenting with life, and we are learning, and we are progressing. It's
A-
okay. None of us here are
Absolutely.
perfect.
Yeah, the image that comes to my mind, and some people say that one way is to describe in Greek sin or error in so many words is missing the target of an archer. So I love that image of to make mistakes is you're pointing your effort to get the arrow into the target. But when you miss, you don't look away. You look at the mistake so that you can correct the next time. You be better at hitting the target. So I think this is for all of us, right? Let's look at this topic of guilt as this is for me at least, and as the barometer to correct us on something is not quite right. And I don't really know if it's my education, a past life, or something that I've done, something I've done. So let's look at it and find ways to redirect ourselves. And the path to do this is not only this awareness, right? This looking inside of us, but also forgiveness and understanding that if I caused some pain to myself or to anyone, let's take the time to heal it, to repair it, to become whole again. But with that, Anne, I want to say goodbye. We've reached our end of our time to get together. We'll be back again. Love to have you here talking about guilt, especially in relationship to that parental emotional manipulation. It's a mouthful as it is, but thank you so much, Anne. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.